What's the name of this podcast again?
Unpacking Ideas.
Hello, and welcome back to Unpacking Ideas. I'm your host, Max Robinson. Today we have with us Zachary. Zachary, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Max. Thank you for having me on.
Now, if I recall correctly, you came on because you had some very interesting opinions about the Irish you'd like to share with us today.
Yeah, I'm actually a scholar. I just, I study Irish sociology, and I've come to. I'm not very good at bullshitting. I mean, this is
so that brings us to our topic today. That does bring us to our topic today. If you would like to give an introduction to the topic today,
all right.
So this is actually your podcast.
I actually am the host, and some people might have been fooled because we have a very similar voice, very similar timbre.
Yeah,
and
but
I'm actually Zach. You're Max.
3 years of act. I introduced you as Zach.
Oh, okay.
I was gonna say I have 3 years of acting training. And I took improv, and a lot of the things you learn in improv and acting is to like find the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and you have sort of roll with it. Some whatever gets thrown your way. If you're on a show and you're an improv show and someone's like, oh, and like I've got a basket of apples, and you're like, no, you don't.
Yeah, right.
Like, fuck you. Like, no, like that's
then the game's over.
The game's over, right? You have to say yes, and
yes.
I'm gonna take an apple, right? That's
Yes.
the foundation of
mom.
Yeah, that's right. That's perfect,
them
right? Now you have something to give
a relationship, and
that's really the foundation of improv, and I think that's also the foundation of bullshit, right? Is you have this sort of core principle of deceptive sort of truth-telling, a sort of deceptive narrative, right? And part of the bullshit isn't just that you will say something that is sort of bridging that like truth and that fiction, is that you're able to then say, oh yes, and we're going to spin this in a different way, right? If you look at a lot of political talking heads, they all agree with each other. They're all sort of like bouncing off each other. There's a lot of yes and there. And there's a lot of understanding that like you can't drop the ball. You have to play the game. Especially when you look at the way the news cycle flows, right? You have the sort of the shit rolls downhill. You have these sort of like the news breaks and it's interpreted in some way. Yeah. And someone will take that interpretation of it and like, put a little stank on it, if you will. They'll riff on it a little bit.
And it's an artist. There's an artistry.
There's an art form to it, right?
Yeah.
And it's a rhetorical art form.
And he talks about the bullshit artist as being like, it's a different kind of art than the art of lying. I think he says something like the art of lying is more analytical. Bullshitting's more of this like creative. And like an improv. I was even thinking like you're using like politicians are a lot of times great bullshit artists, or like salesmen. I just watched the movie Glengarry Glen Ross.
Oh, I haven't seen that in forever.
Oh, it's so good. I just rewatched it.
That's ABC. It's always be closing. Yeah.
And there's a scene where one of the prospects comes in to like get his money back, and like as he's coming in, Al Pacino says to Jack Lemmon's character, like, all right, like here's the scene, like you just bought land from me, and like we're closing a deal, and like you're this high profile guy. So they just create this whole world, and they're great at it. They just like fall into these characters basically to manipulate this guy to get out of giving him his money back. But it's a real talent.
Have we done a proper introduction?
We haven't. So we're reading Harry Frankfurt's On Bullshit.
2005, right?
So, it was actually a first essay in 86 in the just like tiny little journal, the Raritan Quarterly Review Journal. And then I guess they just kind of rediscovered it, Princeton University Press. Made it into a book in 2005, and it became a New York Times bestseller.
And it should be. It's a very good read.
Yeah. And Yeah, he's an analytical philosopher, does a lot of stuff about philosophy of mind, and I kind of wondered how many people kind of knew what they're getting into with this book, because it does kind of stand out in the philosophy section at like a Barnes & Noble. You know, you're looking at all these kind of like discourse on rationality, and then you see like on bullshit. But it's very, very serious book. Like he's not joking here. He's like really seriously trying to.
It's a foundational text of modern philosophy.
Yeah.
I read it in my like philosophy 100 class in college.
Oh, cool.
Because it was so integral to understanding just what the fuck is going on anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you really, you know, study the rhetoric, if you really study, you know, the linguistic tricks, if you really look at the modern sort of like philosophical landscape, like you will need to understand what bullshit is, because it's all there. It's permeated every aspect of modern life, of modern culture. You know, the birds do it, the bees do it, the educated fleas do it. They're all fucking bullshitting you.
Yeah.
You specifically, the listener.
Well, so that kind of lends well into the beginning of this book, which he starts right on page 1 here. Says, one of the most salient features of our culture is that there is so much bullshit. Everyone knows this. Each of us contributes his share, but we tend to take the situation for granted. And then he says later on page 1, we have no clear understanding of what bullshit is, why there's so much of it, and what function it serves. So he's kind of pointing to an interesting thing that you kind of alluded to, which is like, we all use this word bullshit. We all kind of implicitly acknowledge that there's a lot of bullshit around us, but nobody has done what Frankfurt so bravely did and like actually tried to define what is this thing we're all calling bullshit, and like, you know, what are its sufficient and necessary conditions, and like how can we distinguish it from lying and all the rest. Maybe we can start with lying, because he talks a lot about lying.
Right. Okay.
And that might be a good jumping off point. We can kind of define what he says lying is, look at different kinds of lies, and then we can, you know, contrast it with bullshitting.
Right.
So this was page... actually don't have the page number, sorry.
Thanks.
But he says, quote, in some accounts of lying, there is no lie unless a false statement is made. In others, a person may be lying even if the statement he makes is true, as long as he himself believes that the statement is false and intends by making it to deceive.
Yeah.
So I think
it's all very couched in deception, in the logic of it.
Yeah.
Right. The lie is to not tell the truth.
Right. So like the example I thought of is, if I think that I have $5 in my pocket.
This is from the book, because he says he has $20 in his pocket.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So we'll use $20. If I think that I have $20, if I think I have $20 and you ask me how much money do I have in my pocket, and I say 10, and it actually turns out I do have 10, but I thought I had 20. There are some people who say, well, that's not a lie because you actually did have what you say. But there's other people who say, well, it's the fact that you know...
He's just a bad liar. Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's the fact that you thought that you were deceiving. It doesn't actually matter that you actually by accident turned out to be right.
Right.
So it's more about, your intention to deceive. And he also makes the point that, like, you have to then, that means to lie, you have to at least believe that you know the truth or be concerned with what is true.
Right.
Because you're basically saying the opposite of what is true. Mm-hmm. And I was also reading Montaigne, Michel de Montaigne, the philosopher, his thing on lying, and he has a similar definition. He says, quote, telling a lie means saying something false but which we have taken for true. Lying, as defined in Latin, implies going against our conscience, and thus implies only to those who say what is contrary to what they know.
Right. I think that's good as sort of like a way of spinning off into these sort of broader categories, especially when you get into defining bullshit, like the classic example is I didn't do the reading, but I'm still just gonna like make shit up, right? Where like you don't know what's true, or, like what's false, but like, oh well, I thought he had a really good interpretation of humbug. If you actually go on page 25 here, where he says, now who knows exactly what really happened, you really sort of get a sense of like, well, the difference between lying, where he knows the truth, and bullshitting is the sense that no one knows really what's going on behind the scenes, right? Like not even the person with that statement, right? And that's bullshit. That was right. Like I didn't do the reading. I'm just kind of
making shit up.
Right.
And it could be true. It could not be true. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter.
Right. And that's the narrative aspect of it I was going back to, whereas the narrative of it is like, my narrative to you is that I did the reading. And now I am trying to convey that message. Yeah. Right. Maybe I read half of it. I know a little bit, or maybe I, read the Spark Notes, or got a friend who walked me through a couple chapters of it. Yeah. Right. Like the truth of the matter and the falsehood of the matter is or not really true, but like it'd be impossible to lie in that situation unless you ask me, did you do the reading?
Right.
If I say yes, that's a lie. But like, what would you think of the reading? Well, like, I thought he had a really good understanding of rhetoric.
Which is kind of like a politician's dodge. Because if, like, if you are asked... and
you never get a politician to say yes or no.
Exactly. Right? Because then you can be accused of lying. Mm-hmm. Where if you're dodging the question by maybe answering a different question... There was a great example of this. I recently watched the Ted Bundy documentary, and this journalist, he's in jail.
Who framed Ted Bundy?
So, not that one. The mainstream one.
Yeah. So the one the government would like you to watch.
Yeah. So there was he's in prison, and the journalist says to him,
"Did you do it, Ted?"
Yeah. Like point blank, "Are you guilty?" And he answers. I actually want to pull this up because it's so great. He says, he laughs and says, "Guilty? What, does that include the time I stole a comic book when I was 5 years old? No man is truly innocent. We've all transgressed in some way in our lives."
Right. You answered the question, but the question was, did you
kill these
20
women?
20 women. That was Ted Bundy, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, and part of that is, I guess, on the journalist for not being like, kill those women.
Yeah, right.
Tedrick.
Just saying, are you guilty? He was able to then bullshit his way out of it.
No, I think that's a really good example of like how, I think if you ever study law, one of the things they tell you to do is like, you have to be very deliberate about what you say. Like lawyers or like fairies, right? Like you can't say like, are you guilty? You have to be like, did you kill 27 women? Ted Bundy.
Yes or no.
Or just say like, have you ever knowingly murdered a woman?
Right.
Ted Bundy. Right? You cannot give them, right, the space between words is how they get out of it, right? You have to construct your sentences with very little space between the words, because then they can't escape.
Right.
Right.
And sometimes you can. So like we were saying earlier, the example he uses is like, when somebody asks how much money is in your pocket, and this is like super close to home for me because I've been selling comedy tickets in Times Square, and I have other sellers who ask me that question all the time, like, how much did you make tonight? And I've actually like answered fairly honestly in the past and gotten like people getting super territorial and like aggressive as a result of that. So now when I'm asked that question, I'm put in an awkward situation where I don't want to tell the truth because I don't want these guys to get like resentful and like territorial because I've been threatened for telling the truth. So I was actually having a conversation with a friend, like what is the response? Like I don't want to lie outright and say,
ask me that question.
Okay, how much money is in how much did you make tonight?
Fuck, I wish I made more.
Yeah, so that's a great non-answer.
Yeah.
And my friend, I thought she had a brilliant answer. She said to say something vague like, "Oh, it's been a slow night," which kind of implies or alludes to an answer without actually answering it.
Yeah. Or you just lie.
But it's you can
just lie. You don't have to do this. Just make shit up. Did you kill those men, Ted Bundy? No, I did not.
Yes. Yeah,
I am an innocent man.
Right. But I mean, I think that's a big part of this piece is him saying like, this is the big difference between lying and bullshitting. Is bullshitting is not even, it's not even concerned with the truth. The bullshitter almost just doesn't even care if what they're saying is true or not. Whereas the liar inexplicably is concerned with truth values.
Which I think is why there's so much bullshitting. Is because why what is the point in lying nowadays? Right? Like what is if you're in a situation where like you need to convey something that is just categorically incorrect and you know it's false, like you're really going to be doing yourself a disservice if you just lie about it. Because everyone will immediately figure it out.
And something that Frankfurt mentions is that the consequences are more severe for the liar than the bullshitter.
Yeah.
He says on page 50, quote, "The consequences of being caught are generally less severe for the bullshitter than the liar. People do tend to be more tolerant of bullshit than of lies, perhaps because we are less inclined to take the former as a personal affront."
Yeah. If you want a great legal trick, you always begin every sentence with, "to the best of my knowledge."
Yeah. Or allegedly, I killed those
Someone
people.
caught me doing that. I was like,
to the best of your knowledge.
Yeah, I opened a sentence with, "to the best of my knowledge," and they're like, "What the fuck are you talking about?"
Because it's an out. You can always...
Right, well, if it's not true, like this is what I know, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I was being deceptive with them. I think I was just trying to be like, well, I don't really know what's going on, but like to the best of my knowledge, right? Like how much, how many tickets do you sold? Oh, to the best of my knowledge, I sold like 50 tickets. Well, what?
Yeah.
Did you? Like, this is what I mean, right?
I was thinking on this point too, there's almost then a motivation for people to not learn the truth, because if you know the truth and you want to convey the opposite, then you are forced to lie. Whereas if you like keep yourself blind to the truth, then you can just be bullshitting. So like, even to use the, I don't know, like the comedy example. So when I'm selling tickets, I always find out the morning of who's going to be there from the club, and I print it out, like these are the people, just because like I feel better about like, I'm going to tell you who you're actually going to see. There's a lot of people who they just like pitch from just this like laminated thing that's the same every day, and they're just kind of pointing at like, oh yeah, like fucking Marina Franklin's gonna be there, or like this person's gonna be there, which is like, it's bullshit. She actually might be there, but it's like, if they actually knew who the comedians were and they sucked, then they would have to lie in order to say Marina Franklin's gonna be there when they actually know who's gonna be there.
Where do you work? Where's your territory?
Times Square.
So, like, do you get a lot of people who just don't know who these comedians are?
Oh, for sure.
What do you say when they ask you about that?
Well, you mean you show, like, their credentials. I mean, it's a big selling point.
Credentials?
Like, late night shows they've been on.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do you just have those on hand?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of what I get from my club and the boss. It's like, here's the comedian, here are the things, and I like print up a little bio of who they are and whatnot. But I don't know, I think it's an interesting point is like, because the consequences are less severe, it's like not only do you have no motivation to learn the truth, but you actually like there's an incentive to not learn the truth in some cases.
Or I feel like with that example, that's a bad example. Because if it's like, oh, who's playing well, it could be this person, like who's a comedian you like? Just give me a name.
Bill Burr.
Right. I can say like, oh, like it could be Bill Burr. Like Bill Burr could be there tonight, but like I feel like a savvy bullshit artist would say like, well, who's there? Well, we've had great comedians. We've had Bill Burr come through. We've had...
It's again like answering a different question.
That's not the question.
Who has been there?
Right. And that's what I mean, where it's like, it's the more abstract you get, the harder it is for you to get pinned down as just fucking lying. Right? Like, if you asked me who is playing tonight, and I said, oh, Bill Burr is there, and Bill Burr's not there.
And you knew he's not going to be there.
And I knew he wasn't going to be there.
It'd be a lie.
It'd be a lie, right. But if I say, like, oh, you know, great comedians, we had Bill Burr come through, we had Billy Wayne Davis come through, we had, you know,
it doesn't matter that it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, Billy Wayne Davis. There's a stand-up, there's a comedy club actually near here that has Larry David's thing, like Larry David's portrait out front.
Yeah.
And there's a comedian there who's just like, I can't believe they still have Larry David's portrait out here. Larry David hasn't stepped foot in this building in 30 damn years.
Right. It
like,
just becomes
it's just become like so integral to that,
which is,
that
it's bullshit.
Space, right? That's part of the bullshit. Right. But like, you know, like if I go to you know, Joe's Pizza, where's that place on 14th Street? You know that place, the pizza place from Spider-Man. Joe, I think it's Joe's or Ray's or whatever. If I go down to Joe's Pizza and I'm just like, you know, why do you have a picture of, like, you know, Andrew Garfield getting pizza here? That was 10 years ago. Like, I want to look like an asshole, right?
Yeah.
You know, like, yeah, like Andrew Garfield got pizza here like 5 years ago,
right,
like on the set of, you know, the Spider-Man press tour. Like, sure, but like no one cares. Like that could be bullshit, but like no one's gonna give a shit about that.
Nobody's gonna, like call you on it.
Right. That's like every I've been to a million diners where they've got a picture of like some celebrity on the wall.
Yeah.
And like that photo was very clearly taken in the 80s.
Right.
And I don't care. Like sure, like have, you know, Seth MacFarlane got lunch here 2008. Like I don't care. Fuck, you know, whatever. You know, you do you.
Right.
That's bullshit, but like it's not malicious.
Totally. Right. And it's not an outright lie either. He also talks about bluffing a little bit. He says bullshitting is closer to a bluff than a lie.
Yeah.
And the thing, he talks about bullshitting as being something somewhat as a verb, or to call bullshit. Like one can call bullshit and the same thing that you can call somebody on a lie.
Yeah.
And that, like, if, I don't know, you say, I don't know, I've got $50 in my wallet, like I call bullshit. Like I say you don't have anything. So that
could be a lie because like you don't know, you don't have $50 in your wallet unless you do not know what's in your wallet and you're just like hey, can we go to a club? Like, yeah, man, I probably got like $50 in my wallet or something. I'd be like, I call bullshit on that. Like, open your wallet, tell me how much you have right now.
Yeah.
Right? As opposed to, do you have any money in your wallet? Yes, I have $50, but you don't really have anything.
Right, you
That's
probably
sort of
wouldn't call bullshit. You would just
right. Well, I think that's important. I think bullshit is, must have a narrative and must have a storytelling component to it.
Yeah,
it's a rhetorical action. To bullshit is a rhetorical action that revolves a level of storytelling that you can then call bullshit. Right? Calling bullshit isn't to say the facts that you're presenting to me are inaccurate. It's to say the story that you're telling me is bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? This narrative you're framing is horseshit, is bullshit, is humbug, is whatever. Right? Because that's where you're going from lying to bullshitting.
Right. And there's another interesting kind of nuance to this, which is bullshit. He talks about actual poop a decent amount here, and
it's philosophy, folks.
Yeah, in a very serious manner. But so bullshit isn't so much. It's not just saying an untruth. It's also, in some instances like not actually saying anything. It's kind of like void of substance.
Yeah.
And he talks about hot air. And so people use the expression like hot air. He's full of hot air. It's maybe not used so much anymore. This is maybe like a...
Well, you know why they call Chicago the Windy City?
Why?
Why do you think they do?
The people there are full of hot air.
Yeah. It has nothing to do with the actual wind.
Okay.
It's all the politicians...
They're just bullshitters.
Making wind.
Did you just bullshit that, or is that an actual thing?
Look it up.
Okay.
Look it up right now. This is a visual medium. This is an audio medium. Look it up right now.
All right. We'll pause the tape.
No, don't pause the tape. Do it live on air.
My thing is... Oh, you're showing me the...
Yeah, I'm showing you.
Cool.
Yeah.
Learn something new every day.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well,
I don't want you to think I was bullshitting you.
No. So hot air is speech that is removed of all informative content. And let me just read him on this. This is page 43 of the version I have. He says, quote, "When we characterize and talk as hot air, we mean that what comes out of the speaker's mouth is only that. It is mere vapor. His speech is empty, without substance or content. There are similarities between hot air and excrement, incidentally, which make hot air seem an especially suitable equivalent for bullshit. Just as hot air is speech that has been emptied of all informative content, so excrement is matter from which every nutritive has been removed." So, yeah. So when we think of, like, what is poop, it's food minus all of the nutrition, all of the substance. And, like, this just made me think of so much, especially a lot of, and not to, like, pick on books that, like, newer books, but I feel like a lot of newer books just contain a lot of bullshit, a lot of hot air. Probably part of that is, like, publishers want every book to be like 250 pages so that they can sell it. Like, so even if a book only needs to be 30 pages to convey the idea, like, the publisher will come back to them like, this needs to be longer. So then they'll just fill it with bullshit, just like, you know, a bunch of filler, essentially, in order to...
The fluff.
Fluff, hot air, bullshit. So that's another, I think, component of it, and why maybe we use the word bullshit, is that, like, at least according to Frankfurt.
That's a good theory. Yeah. I think it's got a good sort of ring to it.
Yeah. I think fun word to say.
Yeah, I don't think people are calling anything humbug anymore.
It's not as satisfying.
Yeah.
Bullshit is it's got the buh.
Cut your shit, man.
It's just...
Or just, like, the crock of shit.
Yeah.
Horse shit.
Horse shit's a fun one.
Yeah. Jack shit.
The other thing he says about shit, which is he says, he talks about the act of shitting is, like, I'll just read him here. Quote, "It does seem fitting to construe carelessly made shoddy goods as in some way analogous of bullshit." And then he says, quote,
I'm going to push back on that.
Well, let me just finish the
finish
thing.
Finish it. I'm going to push back.
This is the bullshitter by his very nature a mindless slob? Is his product necessarily messy or unrefined? The word shit does, to be sure, suggest this. Excrement is not designed or crafted at all. It is merely emitted or dumped. It may have a more or less coherent shape, or it may not, but it is, in any case, certainly not rot.
I think that's an insult to bullshitters everywhere who hone their craft.
That they
can be artists. They can be a bullshit artist.
Yeah.
Right? They can be a professional bullshitter.
You're right. He is kind of saying the opposite of what he said earlier about the bullshit artist.
Right. I think that you can have a bullshit artist who crafts a well-written, coherent narrative with compelling characters and a desirable worldview. Who cares if it's bullshit?
But what about somebody who's, like, talking out of their ass and there's just, like, that drivel coming out?
Yeah, it's just, like, nonsense. That's bullshit. That's horseshit.
That's bullshit. It's like, it's not... Yeah, it does have a kind of...
But to say it's all shit, it's like, well...
Yeah.
Some of the good stuff. Yeah. You can find a diamond in the rough there.
Yeah.
You pay a piece of whole corn.
We can't lump all bullshit together into one thing. So maybe some of it's drivel, some of it's rot and crafted. Well, so maybe we can move on to talking about the other questions. So I thought it was funny because he asked these three questions up front. You know, what is bullshit? Why is there so much bullshit? And what function does bullshit serve? But 99% of this essay is just like, what is bullshit? And then the last 3 pages, he's like, oh, by the way, like, let's explore the implications.
I think why is there so much bullshit and the function that bullshit serves are very intertwined. I think it's because...
I even lumped them in my notes as the same.
They're very similar, and it's like, well, why is there so much bullshit? Well, it's because, you know, the nature of narrative and information has changed to the point where you have to be crafting these narratives. You have to be deceptive. And why is that so? Well, because the way we consume information has changed, right? It's entirely cyclical. If you look at, going back to the pizza place example, like, it's so easy to just look at that and say, well, what's the point? But, like, there's something very comforting about going and seeing a bunch of random celebrity pictures in a restaurant, because they're like, well, okay, like,
this place is legit.
This is a real restaurant, right? Like, people eat here, right? I'm eating here now. Like, clearly these guys have eaten here, right? Who cares if...
adds to the actual experience of the pizza.
Right. There's like every comedy club that, Jerry Seinfeld did a tour in. Like, they all...
have his picture.
They got his picture up there. Yeah. Who cares if Jerry's done, like, 2 sets there, like, 1974. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Like, that's just part of the story. Mm-hmm. And if I went to a comedy club and, like, no one's picture was on the wall, I'd be like, the fuck is going on? Like, this place just opened? Like, who are these people?
Right.
Right? That's just how we consume information now, right?
Well, and this was written in the 80s, before the internet. Mm-hmm. So I think that's fascinating too, is he kind of...
Frankfurt would be absolutely shook to his core if we dragged him out.
I think he's still alive.
He's still alive?
He's an old timer, but he's still kicking.
Yeah, man.
So he's probably like... maybe that's why this blew up in 2005.
Yeah.
Is because the internet had kind of already gotten its legs.
That would have been the golden age of the internet would have been like right
around there at the boom. So you have that happening, and then, but he doesn't obviously talk about the internet because it was written before then, but he does say, this is page 62, on this question of why is there so much bullshit today. He kind of asks the question. He says, quote, "Why is there so much bullshit? Of course, it is impossible to be sure that there is relatively more of it nowadays than in other times." And then he says, "There is more communication of all kinds in our time than ever before, but the propagation that is bullshit may not have increased." So he's saying, like, it could just be that for all time there has been this same level of bullshit, but now that we all have
access to it.
Well, access to it, or like more social media accounts or whatever, like, we're able to just become more aware, which makes me think, similar argument I've heard about things like, like sexual harassment, which is like, the argument's basically like, it's not that there's more sexual harassment happening now than in previous generations. Right. It's just that now we're hearing about it. There's more cameras, yeah. And there's like more of the public that actually wants to hear about it.
You look at bullshit, like, what is old-timey bullshit? Like, there's been old-timey propaganda forever. Even,
like, go back to Plato and, like, the sophists.
Right.
Like, they were all about the bullshit.
I have no idea what that is. You have to fill me in on that.
Yeah.
Fill me in on that.
So, like, sophistry was a school of philosophy who were basically only concerned with winning an argument and basically saying whatever they needed to say in order to win the argument. Whereas, Plato and Socrates were all gung-ho about, like, truth and, like, very anti-sophists. So the sophists were, in a sense, like, very similar to, like, the modern day defense attorney or somebody who's just, like, they don't really care what is true. They're saying whatever they need to say in order to win their case.
Right. That is bullshit. That's a lot. But like, that's old-timey ancient bullshit.
Bullshit, yeah.
Right? People have been fucking lying, for as long as there's been language, right?
So I tend to kind of think that, I kind of personally buy that more, that, like, it's not so much that there's more bullshit today, it's just that we're seeing more of it.
Yeah.
And it's able
wouldn't, if you were living in ancient Greece, I don't think you'd have any interaction with, like, the sophists unless you were, like, hanging out at the academy or, like, knew Socrates personally, but
not
like
a slave, yeah,
right. But, like, now it's just like, oh, like, I have this magical box, and every time I turn it on, I can watch civilization collapsing in real time.
Yeah.
And everyone's just fucking bullshitting on it because it's an attention economy, and you just got to get everyone to look at you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can imagine, like, now we're just so inundated with it. It's like with the printing press. Like, everyone suddenly wrote, the printing press after the printing press, there was this boom of all these just weird, like, like cult and spirituality and, like, all these, wild ideas percolating. Mm-hmm. And it was just because, like, well, like, now if you wanted to convey information to 1 million people, like, you didn't have to write 1 million books out. You could just...
You didn't have to go through a publisher.
Right. You could just get a printing press, just write whatever
own,
crazy shit you wanted, and then just, you know, hand deliver it to a bunch of people the next town over, and they'll be like, oh, well, I guess, you know, there is a secret civilization buried under the earth that, you know, has this magic technology. Yeah, fuck it, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
There's also, so it's, he doesn't really take a hard stance on this. Like I said, it's only a couple pages at the end, because he kind of says, okay, well, maybe there isn't more bullshit now, but then he kind of says, well, actually, maybe there is. Maybe the reason that there is because citizens in a democracy believe it's their duty to basically have an opinion about everything.
Yeah.
So I thought that was an interesting argument. I'll just read what he says about this. This is page 63. It says, bullshit is unavoidable whenever circumstances require someone to talk without knowing what he is talking about. Thus, the production of bullshit is stimulated whenever a person's obligations or opportunities to speak about some topic exceed his knowledge of the facts that are relevant to the topic.
This is going back to what we were talking about with the did you do the reading, is the bullshitting.
Yeah.
You know, like, and this is, I don't know why it is, like, I hate this so much. I think this is such a toxic aspect of our culture, but I think that, like, people are so terrified to look into a camera and just be like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, man.
Yeah.
Right? Like, people don't do that anymore.
Or to not have an opinion about something. Like, if somebody's like, what is your opinion about gun control? What is your opinion about recycling? Like, there are certain things where I just, like, don't, like, recycling. Like, I don't have an opinion.
I have an opinion on recycling. Why don't you?
I don't know enough.
I know.
And for me, it's like I don't know enough to have a informed opinion.
Right, or someone will pull that wild card on you. Where it's like, oh, I like recycling. They're like, well, did you know that, like, only like a third of anything that you recycle like actually gets recycled? It's like, well, fuck. Now I gotta reestablish my thoughts.
Exactly.
Right.
You have to. I'm like, I haven't. You know, it's just not been on the top of my to-do list. But the democracy point's interesting because it is like, at least, you know, we're supposed to feel like, okay, we have this civic duty to, like, know about these issues that we're voting on, but there's just so many issues, and it's like, okay, obviously we can't all be climate scientists, we can't all be you know, like we were talking about this during dinner, like legal scholars, like, so in a sense, like, we can't really have an informed opinion about everything, but we kind of are in a position where we need to, or at least a lot of us feel we need to.
Right. And also, it's a culture that is very quick to punish you if you say, like, if you say you don't know, but also it's very quick to punish you if you're like, oh, like, I need to do my research on this. Like, admitting weakness in that way, right? It's a culture that's very quick to punish you if you're, like, on a debate and, like, you hear your other guy's argument, and you're like, oh, fuck, man, like, that's actually pretty good. Like, I'm going to say what he said, right? Like, yeah, like...
Well, there's you're either for us, against us.
You have to be for it or against it, and if, like, you live in a society that punishes you for being wrong, punishes you for not knowing, and it punishes you for changing your mind, well, then the only out you have is to either be right or to just make it up, just bullshit. Be like, well, you know, I believe very strongly in, you know, X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
And stuff.
So maybe we can end by going through a few of these, like, pop phrases that we hear a lot in society, and talking about how they might.
I'm gonna jump the gun. I want to say all of these are the result of people knowing that feeling of being bullshitted and just not having that word available to them.
Well, so one of them,
hit me.
Talking out of your ass.
Oh, really? I wonder where that came from.
That's I mean,
right? That's bullshit, right? Like, that's bullshitting. You're talking out of your ass, right?
You're making shit up.
Yeah.
Without. Yeah, I
guess
that
could be more like lying.
Maybe a nuance with this is bullshitting versus talking out of your ass is like, there is a disregard for what you're saying versus a disregard for whether what you're saying is true or not.
Yeah.
So, like,
that could be good. Yeah.
talking out of your ass, you just like don't really even care about what you're saying. Whereas bullshit has like a goal. There's a goal to bullshit. You just don't care if the bullshit is true. You're still trying to, sell the thing or, whatever.
Sales pitch.
Yeah. This was one that I thought was shit talking or trash talking.
That's sort of, I think that could be interpreted as bullshit with the intent to harm.
Yeah. And the Webster's called this disparaging, taunting, or boastful comments. But it does have a kind of like absurdity or like disconcern with the truth. And that, like, the example I thought of is just like somebody saying like, "Oh man, my grandma could beat you in a game of basketball and she ain't got no legs." Like, like that.
Sure, why not?
But that has like, that is obviously not
what does that even
factually
mean?
True,
right?
But it has a certain disregard of the truth of like, okay, it's just meant to convey like you suck at basketball, but
that's the narrative.
My grandma might have 2 perfectly good legs.
Right, there's a lie.
Be
there.
a pretty good, have a pretty good jump shot, for all we know. How about smooth talking?
Bullshit with the intent to seduce. Sexual in the way that all things are sexual.
Yeah.
Everything from a sales pitch to flirting with someone.
Yeah.
But I feel like when you smooth talk, you are playing towards that like monkey brain primal portion of yourself, of your conscious, that's just like driven entirely by like sex and pleasure.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
This vacuum cleaner will rock your world. It will grow your hair. It will unpoison your well, and your wife will come back to you. It's like, fuck yeah, sign me up for it.
Yes. You're speaking to that person's desires.
Right.
Yeah, I think of smooth talking too, of if like somebody getting caught cheating and like kind of smooth talking their way out of it. He talks about a bull session and like shooting the bull. I never heard of a bull session. The bull session is just...
You never heard of shoot the shit?
Shooting the shit, but I think shooting the shit's a little different, I think. Because a bull session is like you're basically trying out positions and ideas with everybody knowing that you don't... I've never heard of
this one before.
Yeah, so he says, quote, "Participants try out various thoughts and attitudes in order to see how it feels or to hear themselves saying such things and in order to discover how others respond without it being assumed that they are committed to what they say." So
I've done this before, but never in a organized setting. I've definitely approached people and I was like, "Hey man, like, can I run something by you?" And they'll be like, "Sure." And I'm like, "What if I told you I was going to like shave my head?" And they'd be like,
yeah,
don't do that. Or like, "Yeah, like you should go for it." But like, I've never had a thing where I like sat a focus group. Never had a thing where I sat a focus group down. I'm like, I'm gonna run through a couple of different haircuts with you, and like, you tell me what you think of it. Like, I've never done that before.
Yeah, well, I've heard it. Like, I have a friend who I met at like a philosophy meetup, mutual friend. We probably both know him, and he told me that sometimes if the group is like all a little bit too homogenous and like all kind of echoing each other, he'll just like take the opposite stance just to kind of liven up the conversation and the debate. So it's like he doesn't actually agree with the other thing necessarily, but just to kind of spark, just to
rock the boat,
to spark dialogue and to, because it's basically like trying out different ideas that you don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah,
you're just trying to.
That's good. You know,
say like, okay,
like, well, what?
It's like debate club, maybe even.
Yeah, it's like the part of debate club that doesn't make me want to kill people in debate club. Where I'm just like, oh, like your whole like, because debate club is, to bring it back, just full of these sophists.
Well, yeah, because you flip a coin of like you see that like, yeah, you're okay, heads, now you have to argue in favor of the Second Amendment, whatever. Yeah,
right. But like, as opposed to like, okay, like, well, like, sit down, like, actually, like, work through the thought process of like that opinion and like really like, you know, take it apart. And like, sometimes it's good because that will allow you, like, if you feel very strongly in one way or the other, and you're like, well, let me try, you know, to really get, you know, really sink my teeth into the other opinion, and you come out the other end of it realizing like, oh, these people are fucking crazy. Like, of course my opinion is correct.
Yeah.
Right? That could be a really good exercise for you.
And it's forcing you to kind of like strongman a lot of the, because you're arguing against something always, you're not having to actually see the most charitable argument of the other side. Maybe one or two more of these just real quick. So it's shooting the shit. I personally think shooting the shit isn't necessarily bullshit.
I don't think there's any bullshit in that.
It's just shallow conversation. It's just maybe like if I saw a friend, like I'm about to see a buddy who's in town who I haven't seen in a while, and we're probably going to shoot the shit for a while.
Yeah.
In terms of just like, how's your wife doing? It's like you wouldn't call like having a deep conversation about God shooting the shit. You would have like, oh, how's your mama doing? Like that kind of stuff.
This is like cocktail party banter.
But it's not necessarily like, it's not bullshit. I don't think it's bullshit.
It's not bullshit. I think shooting the shit is the less generous interpretation of what the people across the pond call banter. And I think banter is a better descriptor of it because it has this implication of like a back and forth.
Yep.
Where it's sort of like, I say something, blah, 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 how's your wife? And you're like, oh, she's good. She just started crocheting. I'm like, oh, I've started crocheting more. I've just crocheted this, T-shirt. We're just kind of bantering.
Right.
We're going back and forth.
There's a back and forth.
And like the shooting the shit, like is very American, very sort of crass way of saying that.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's any bullshit there, unless you're deliberate, unless you're trying to like smooth talk them or
Right. I'd agree with that for sure. Just two more real quickly. Pretentious bullshit. So he does make a distinction in that
academia.
Like, not all bullshit is pretentious, but there is some bullshit that is pretentious.
That is academia. That is academia to a T.
This to me also made me think of like when we're talking about shit as being like food void of nutrition, and that like if you can, by using pretentious language and rhetoric, basically disguise the fact that you're not actually saying anything. And sometimes it's like if the person were to have to write their argument in a very simple way, or like write as if they're Hemingway or something, and just like you only use 2-syllable words max.
For sale,
you could
never
right
won.
You could see like, oh, this person actually isn't saying anything, or the point they're making is very like it's not as profound as they're making it, but they're clouding it with all of these words.
It's taking taking bullshit and sort of presenting it in a way, or not taking bullshit, but like taking something that's like kind of shit, and putting that little pretentious sort of twist on it
in order to hide
the fact that it's shit.
Totally
right.
And then this last one, I love this expression, blowing smoke up your ass.
I never use that. I've heard it. I've never used that term before.
I've never said it, but it kind of makes me giggle when I hear it.
Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining.
I've never heard that one.
You've never heard that one before?
No.
That is iconic.
What does that mean?
Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining.
Like, don't lie to me?
Yeah. Don't bullshit me.
Oh.
Don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining.
That's a great one. Yeah. That's very much... That is bullshit.
That is bullshit, right.
That is exact bullshit right there. All right, cool, man.
Okay. It's been rad.
Thanks. Thanks for listening to Unpacking Ideas. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend or scroll down and write us a review or give us a rating. I know that all takes a little bit of effort, but it really helps with the algorithm so that more people can discover the show. So thanks for doing that in advance. If you would like to get in touch with me, please visit unpackingideas.com. Or if you would like to see what's coming up on the podcast, visit unpackingideas.com/podcast. And there I post links to articles and essays and books that we'll be discussing on future podcast episodes. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today. Thanks so much for listening, and I will see you next time.